Hi, I'm Nick Jones, a children's author from Congleton in Cheshire. Today I'm going to read my new book, One Night in Beartown, which is based in Congleton and it's illustrated by Cy Clark. Sandy Lane loved bears. Her bed was filled with teddies. Her room was adorned with bear wallpaper. Her shelves were stuffed with every bear story you could think of. Bears had always been a part of Sandy's life. She lived in Congleton, which was nicknamed Beartown because, many years earlier, the town had owned a real-life bear. A big statue of him stood outside Sandy's house. Every night, before bed, she would wave goodnight to him from her window. And every morning, Sandy woke up to her most favourite bear of all, Beresford. Beresford meant the world to Sandy because he'd been passed down to her by her grandma. They went everywhere together, even to school. Another bear that Sandy loved was Bee-Bear. He lived at her school. Bee-Bear was one of 75 painted bears to be found around Beartown. You can imagine how much Sandy loved her hometown with all these bears everywhere. However, not everyone was as fond of bears as she was. Look everybody, Sandy's brought her silly teddy bear to school again. Tommy Pickles had spotted Beresford in Sandy's bag. Laughing, he grabbed the little bear and held him aloft for all to see. Aren't you a bit old to be playing with teddies? Sandy tried to rescue Beresford, but Tommy snatched him away. Do you still read babyish books about teddy bears' picnics too? Silly girl, none of that is real, you know. The other children started laughing and pointing at Sandy. In fact, they laughed so loudly they didn't notice Miss Waggs arrive. Sandy, she barked. What have I told you about bringing toy bears into school? I'm confiscating it this time. You can have it back tomorrow. Sandy looked at her teacher in panic. But miss, No buts, Miss Wagg snapped. Pass it here, Tommy. Tommy smirked at Sandy as he handed Beresford over. Sandy's cheeks burned and she blinked back hot tears. She'd never been parted from Beresford since Grandma had given him to her. Now she would have to go a whole night without him. That evening, Sandy went to a window as usual. She waved goodnight to the statue of the big brown bear, then climbed sadly into bed. Poor Beresford. She imagined him sitting alone in Miss Wagg's desk drawer. How she missed him, and she was sure he was missing her too. Sandy was so upset that she cried herself to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sandy woke up suddenly to a strange sound. Dink! She looked around the darkened room but saw nothing. Dink! There it was again. It sounded like a small stone hitting her window. Sandy got up and slowly walked towards the sound, rubbing her eyes. Then she stopped still and gasped in surprise. Beresford, is that you? Sandy peered down and couldn't believe her eyes. The statue bear, Bee-Bear, and her beloved Beresford were looking up at her and waving. Good evening, whispered the big brown statue bear. Are you going to join us? You can talk? Sandy exclaimed. Shh, said Beresford with his paw to his lips. Then the statue bear continued. Come downstairs as quickly as you can or we'll have to go without you. Sandy looked at Beresford. He stared back at her with his deep brown eyes. She knew she could trust her best friend. Quickly she threw on some clothes. Then she tiptoed through the house and was soon outside in the warm summer night. Before she could say a word, the big brown bear had scooped her up in his enormous paws. He lifted her onto his shoulders and set off down the street. Sandy clung to the big bear's ears with all her strength. She shut her eyes tight as she bounded along. Bobbing and bouncing around on his shoulders was scary at first, but as they raced along the empty pavements with the other two bears, she soon forgot to be afraid. Instead, she felt excited. She opened her eyes and smiled gleefully. Where are they taking me? She wondered. When they reached the town centre, Bee-Bear stopped at an office window. Inside there was another bear statue. This one was covered in newspapers and was called Robert Ted. Bee-Bear knocked on the glass and, to Sandy's amazement, Robert Ted's eyes opened. He yawned and stretched. Then he walked over to a desk, picked up some keys and let himself out of the office. Wow! Cried Sandy. Can you all come to life? Sometimes, said the big brown bear. It doesn't happen often, and it only lasts for one night, which is why we must be quick. and they set off again, marching in the direction of the park. When they arrived, Sandy saw the most incredible, the most wonderful, the most bear-rilliant sight of her life. All the bears from Beartown had arrived for the biggest, loudest, most colourful party you could imagine. There was a bear singing songs and playing guitar at the bandstand. There were bears dancing, and Sandy danced with them. They played ball games together on the grass and hide and seek in the woods. And they had hours of fun in the playground, although the bears kept getting stuck on the slides. They even splashed and splished in the nearby paddling pool. Finally, when they were all worn out, everyone sat down and had, yes, you guessed it, a teddy bear's picnic. After they'd eaten the scrumptious feast, Sandy started to feel very sleepy. "This has been the best party ever," she said. "Thank you for inviting me, Beresford." Beresford cuddled up to her and she squeezed him as tight as she could. Then she yawned and muttered, "Tommy Pickles said bears didn't have picnics, but I knew they did." The big brown bear looked puzzled. "Tommy Pickles?" he replied. "Who's he?" "Oh, just some boy at school," Sandy replied. Then she fell fast asleep. The next morning, Sandy woke up and immediately remembered the night before. She looked on her pillow, under her bed, and around the room. Beresford was nowhere to be seen. She peered out of the window. There was the statue of the big brown bear, in the same old spot and the same old pose. Oh, she sighed, it was just a dream. Sandy didn't say a word to anyone when she arrived at school. She just sat in silence and tried to work, but she couldn't stop thinking about poor little Beresford, all alone in the darkness of Miss Wag's desk drawer. Suddenly, Tommy came rushing into the classroom. "You won't believe what happened last night," he bellowed. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "A gigantic bear knocked on my bedroom window. He was holding a picnic basket. The classroom erupted in laughter. "It's not a joke, it really happened," shouted Tommy. "He was at my window, so he must have been huge. And he'd just been out for a picnic, he told me." Sandy's eyes stretched wide and she grinned from ear to ear. At that moment, she almost felt sorry for Tommy Pickles, and she couldn't wait to give Beresford a great big cuddle at the end of the school day. I hope you enjoyed my story. You can buy One Night in Beartown from my website, nickjonesauthor.co.uk.